Welcome to the Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and this is where characters gather. So today's video is a day late, and I apologize, but the neighbor across the street was having their roof redone yesterday, and it's a very loud process, and the dogs were all upset, and it was just easier to film this today than it was to try to film between dog outbursts and everything that goes with it. So all of our neighbors now have, including us, new or repaired roofs from the hailstorm, and that is a very good thing. So today we're going to talk about what I read last week, and it was a much better reading week than the previous week, which is a very good thing. I do have one soft DNF, and it's a DNF that surprises me, and it's my first ever soft DNF, so we'll see if it's really soft for me. And that is Three Sisters, Three Queens by Philippa Gregory. It is the first time I have ever not consumed a Philippa Gregory book in a day or two. And it's certainly the first time I've ever not liked a Philippa Gregory book. So, incredibly new experience for me. Why did I soft DNF it? I am about halfway through. So far longer than I normally ever give a book a DNF. It is the story of the relationship between, at the time the book opens, Margaret Tudor, Catherine of Aragon, and Princess Mary Tudor. So 2 Tudor princesses and Catherine of Aragon from Spain. Princess Margaret marries James IV of Scotland and becomes the Queen of Scots. Catherine of Aragon, as you know, first marries Prince Arthur, the Prince of Wales, and then she marries Prince Henry, who becomes Henry VIII. Princess Mary is originally betrothed to the Spanish Prince Charles. They break that betrothment, and she weds Louis the 12th, I believe, of France, who at the time is a very old man. And so it is that their relationship, and they all become queens, and they all are princesses in their own right. And the story is told entirely from the perspective of Princess Margaret / Queen of Scots. And it is just a very one-sided story from Margaret's point of view, and Margaret is not necessarily likable in any respect. In fact, she's just flat out not likable. She's incredibly immature when she's married, and that is a product of the time. She's married when she's 13, and it shows in who she is. She's still a child, obviously. She's jealous of Catherine. She thinks Mary is ridiculous. And this pretty much doesn't change throughout her life. She, up to the point where I stopped, she's just, she matures enough that she at least starts to think before she acts, but she's still very petty towards Catherine and Mary. And it's just, I didn't want to read anymore. So I have set it aside, I may or may not return to it, but it wasn't a hard DNF. So, on to what I read this week. Okay, apparently the girls are going to grumble a little bit. Everything else I read this week was on my Kindle. Nope, I take that back. One library book. I'll talk about the library book first. That was Pouncing on Murder by Laurie Cass. I will put a picture right here. I've already returned it to the library. This was book 3 in the Bookmobile Cat series. It was exactly what I thought it would be. It was a charming, cozy mystery centered around the bookmobile. This time, Minnie and Eddie the cat don't stumble across their body. Rather, one of their bookmobile patrons tells them about the unfortunate death of one of her bookmobile patrons. And it just doesn't sit right with Minnie, and she goes nosing around. As always, perfectly enjoyable, perfectly cozy. Just, the series never failed me, so I enjoyed it immensely, and I am looking forward to book 4. Okay, now on to the Kindle reads. And of those Kindle reads, 2 were NetGalley ARCs, and 1 was a Kindle Unlimited. So first is the Kindle Unlimited. That would be How to Kiss Your Enemy by Jenny Proctor. This is the 3rd in the How to Kiss a Hawthorne Brother series. It is a new release. It is Jenny Proctor, so it is clean, it is sweet, it is funny. I loved this book. I filmed a bunch of book tags last week, and they'll be coming out in the weeks to follow. And I loved Lennox and Tatum as a couple. This is not an Insta romance. This is 2 people who know each other, or at least think they know each other, and then they begin to really know each other. And it's definitely a enemies to lovers trope. Jenny Proctor has never been a miss for me, and this was no exception. I loved this book. Okay, so arcs. First arc was Hello Stranger by Catherine Center. I picked this arc up, or requested this arc, based on Oshina Gotta Read 'Em All and her absolute love of Catherine Center. I have never read a Catherine Center book before I picked this book up. I didn't know anything about her as an author, so this was definitely a gamble. So the last arc I read last week was Voice of the Ancient by Connie Lynn Cassette. This was my first Connie Lynn Cassette book. It will not be my last. It is biblical fiction. And the first quarter of the book, I want to say conflicted, but in a very good way. I had to go look up some ancient Israel history. I had to go look up some ancient Israel religious facts, and I may or may not have learned them in school. I don't think I did, and part of that is because we were never taught, and it's not part of the Catholic faith in any sense of the faith, that God had a wife ever. And the first third of the book, quarter of the book, she was referred to, and she was, an ancient Israelite fertility goddess, and she's referred to as the wife of God. I had to go do some research. after I worked all that out and figured out what was missing for me, it all made sense and I had no problem. I enjoyed the story very much. There is action in the story, but this veers a little bit more towards what Marie Bostwick in Esme Calhill Fails Spectacularly calls quiet fiction, in that it's the story of the two main characters, and yes, they're on a quest to save her from the people pursuing her, and he's trying to find his cousin. So there is a quest element, but it's still much more of a quiet fiction than it is a quest book or an action adventure type of story, and that it's much more about them discovering their faith and what God has called them to do and be. And I love that. And I love the fact that it ends on somewhat of a cliffhanger. But if there's never a book 2, which I'm assuming that there is, their story wraps up in a way that is satisfying. Does it answer every question? No. Is it satisfying for the protagonist? Yes. I cannot wait to read more from Connie Lynn Cassette. In fact, if you're thinking of reading Voice of the Ancients and you haven't read a lot of her books, there are 2 books that she has another series. It's a duology. I will put them right here. I know Cedar is in the title of one of them. I cannot remember them off the top of my head this morning. And they involve that duology involves characters you meet in Voice of the Ancient, but you don't have to know their backstory. I am incredibly interested in their backstory at this point, and thus I'm going to pick those books up. I fell in love with Connie Lynn Cassette as an author last week. And mind you, this is only the 3rd ever biblical fiction book I can recall reading. And it is very different in tone and pacing and feel than the Miso Andrews duology I just finished, which I will link down below. And yet, it was still incredibly enjoyable. And I'm looking forward to more. And I have put a couple of, I've put an ancient history book in my need to read book, ancient Israel history book that I need to read because my brain is trying to fill in holes still. And that's one way to do that. So that is what I read last week. What did you read last week? Did you find anything interesting or any good books out there that I need to find and add to my list? Comment down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.